I am PLO LUMUMBA here at the Manzoni Wildlife Estate in Machakos County in the good Republic of Kenya in the continent of Africa. Today we look at a subject which must preoccupy the minds of every African of goodwill and friends of Africa of goodwill: the issue of the silencing of the guns. The question of the silencing of the guns is one that must be seen in a historical context, particularly when we remind ourselves that African countries were colonized and they gained or regained their independence on the basis of artificial boundaries, a number of which have generated conflicts both within those territories and outside of those territories. Indeed, the very agreement which was initiated by conversation in Addis in 1963 and culminated in the Cairo decision to preserve the colonial boundaries is one that was designed to ensure that conflicts were reduced or were not allowed to take place. And it can be argued that since then, only two countries recognized internationally have emerged, and that is Eritrea, which separated from Ethiopia, and South Sudan, which separated from the Sudan. And all these was done with a view to ensuring that the conflicts were reduced. But that notwithstanding, conflicts still bedevil the continent of Africa, either in the form of civil wars, or in the form of insurgencies, or in the form of attempts at changing governments. We have seen civil wars in a number of countries. Nigeria fought a civil war which left scars which have yet to heal. We have seen civil war which is going on in the Cameroon. There was a civil war in Angola. There was insurgency in Mozambique. There was a civil war, or if you may, an insurgency in Somalia with the creation of an unrecognized Republic of Somaliland. There was a civil war or an insurgency in Ethiopia. There was a civil war, or if you may, continuing insurgencies in the Democratic Republic of Congo, insurgencies in the entire Sahel region, in Chad, instability in Libya, an ongoing civil war in the Sudan. And all these create an environment which do not lend themselves to economic development. And that is why the African continent then took the view that in order to realize the continent's potential, the guns must be silenced. And it is important also to remember that beyond the civil wars or the insurgencies, there have also been changes of power which sometimes create instability. Records show that since the year 1960, there have been 2 attempted coups d'etats in Africa. And all these come with certain pain, which then undermine economic growth. In the year 2020, the African Union said that that was the year of silencing the guns, that every initiative would be taken to ensure that there were no more conflicts in the continent of Africa. But beyond the proclamation, very little was done in real terms, in terms of ensuring that the guns were silenced. And one can give a number of examples which demonstrates that beyond pronouncement, very little is done. Look at a conflict that has persisted, for example, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which has remained alive on different intensities since 1991, when Patrice Emery Lumumba was assassinated. It is only for a short time during the administration of Mobutu that one can say that there was almost total control of the Democratic Republic of of Congo, and then a bit during Kabila I and Kabila II. It is now estimated that there is no less than 100 armed groups in the Democratic Republic of Congo alone. To silence those guns has not been easy. Efforts have been made by different players. We had SADC sending in their troops. There have been attempts at negotiation by the president of Angola, João Lourenço. There have been attempts to negotiate them outside of the continent of Africa, involving the Qataris. Rwanda has also been involved in the mix, and we saw what happened. The president of the Republic of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, and President Tshisekedi were paraded in Washington, D.C., and we now know that that did not yield much. So there is a conflict there. The guns have not been silenced. And we have seen that there was also the major conflict that took place in Angola with the administration of Agostinho Neto and Jonas Malheiro Savimbi, which led to a major civil war, and that too did not end very well. Of course, after the death of Savimbi, things did quieten down, and it has undermined trade in that area. And we know what happened in Central African Republic, and we know what happened in Libya post Muammar al-Gaddafi, what happened in Chad after Déby. And all these are creating an environment that makes the countries difficult to run and makes it impossible to undertake basic things such as in health, the building of infrastructure, the building of industries. And then you look at some of the more recent conflicts, which are internal conflicts. The Sudan. The Sudan is unique as we speak in the 21st century. A war that breaks out, and it has now acquired a character which has involved very many players. The African Union is helpless in determining what it can do, and what it does is to issue statements. So we now have a situation where more than 2 million people are displaced internally and externally in Chad, which means the guns are not silent and small arms are now being smuggled. It has actually been revealed that guns are coming from different parts of the continent of Africa, from as far as the United Kingdom, from as far as Bulgaria and Ukraine. And all these are used even by other non-state actors. And this is another thing that we must remind ourselves as Africa, that silencing the gun has become very difficult because of non-state actors who are not uniformed, who are not in any military formation, whose chain of command is unknown. And this is how we have organizations such as Al-Shabaab, we have organizations such as Boko Haram, we have ISIL, and all these are operating within the continent of Africa and operating across boundaries. And even if one were to say, as Africa says, surrender your guns, they'll not surrender because their chain of command sometimes is also outside of the continent. It must also be remembered that the possession of guns through these bodies has also become a commercial enterprise. Kidnapping, for example, in places such as Cameroon and Nigeria has become a business enterprise. And we saw attempts at converting it into a business enterprise even in places such as Somalia, when piracy also became a business enterprise, and non-state actors on the East Indian Ocean in the coast of Somalia way up to Mozambique were also involved in these activities, which begs the question, therefore, when we talk about silencing the guns, the African Union, of course, realized that the guns had not been silent by the year 2020, and on the occasion of the 14th ordinary session of heads of states and government, they now say that we now have to silence the guns by the year 2030. But even that looks like a pipe dream. It looks like a pipe dream because if one analyzes the conflicts that have arisen in the last few years, one sees that the conflicts are becoming more and more, and secessionist tendencies are becoming more and more pronounced, and the regional bodies are becoming weaker and weaker, and the African Union is becoming weaker and weaker. Let us analyze a few of them. Why is it that silencing the guns is also not very easy? The democracy project, as marketed to African countries by European countries to mean periodic elections, to mean multi-party states, to mean having all these indices which Western Europe tells us is what constitutes democracy, appears to be failing. Appears to be failing because in many African countries, post-election chaos and post-election violence is almost becoming something that is to be expected. And even if it doesn't boil over, the dissatisfaction and intolerance that it occasions is a perfect breeding ground for discontent. We have seen such situations in Kenya in the year 2007. We have seen similar situations in Tanzania in the year 2005. We have seen similar situations in Uganda. We have seen similar situations in different countries where election results are rejected. In the Sahelian region, we have seen that the ballot is no longer even accepted. And we have seen coup d'etats in Guinea, in Mali, in Niger, in Burkina Faso, and even in Central Africa, in Gabon, in Guinea-Bissau. And when that happens, insurgency and change of power by the power of the gun or through the barrel of the gun becomes the only avenue that is available to the people. The net effect, therefore, is that we find ourselves in a situation in the continent of Africa where in order to silence the guns, there is need for Africans of goodwill at all levels to ask, what must we do to immunize ourselves from situations that lead to conflict? I think that many times those who want to solve problems in Africa deal with the symptoms rather than the problem. They apply what I call band-aid solutions to what is a cancerous problem. And the cancer is bad governance. The cancer is greed and megalomania. The cancer is kleptocracy, thieving by African politicians. The cancer is the mobilization of people on the basis of religion and or ethnicity. And when that happens, then it becomes very difficult to create an environment where people's rights are respected, and therefore, if their rights are respected, then they can make decisions in an environment that is tranquil. 2030 will be with us. What then, beyond lamentation and complaining, must we do? African Union and the regional communities, I have said and say again, we must have a critical meeting at which we ask, what is the problem of governance in Africa? Having answered that question, we must answer the question, what must we do to answer that governance problem? And after we have said that, within what period must we deal with this? And it would require that all peoples who have arms, both state and non-state actors, are involved in this conversation, because it is only then that Africa will have an environment in which it can thrive when the guns are truly silent and the environment is good for purposes political, economic, cultural, and development in its totality. Otherwise, we'll be engaged in a constant state of sorrow and lamentation, and that would be unfortunate.
The world is changing, and so is Africa's reality. Political shifts, new partnerships, and economic opportunities. And we're here to uncover why and how it's done. What do the billion-dollar IMF loans have to do with the Kenyan unrest? Are US and French troops actually withdrawing from African states after years of presence? Is Europe's so-called green agenda so green and helpful after all? Why are more and more African countries increasing trade with Russia? And how is Britain lending Africa the treasures London looted? Now, from colonial legacies and security to the future of African democracies, we break down the key challenges ahead and analyze the solutions. While the world is watching Africa, tune in with us and question more with RT International on Maisha TV Kenya.
Problem number one is leadership in Africa.
What can we do for Africa? That was a wrong question. The right question was, what can we do with Africa?
What Africa do we want?
Africa had to seek first the political kingdom, and the rest would be given unto them. Unfortunately, we sought and obtained the political kingdom, but there is still a debate as to whether the rest has been given unto us.
Half of our people here are below 20 years old. Yes? Look at the average age of our presidents. It's about 63, 64 years old. We're the only continent in the world where we have presidents at 90 years old, starting new terms. I mean, you guys are crazy or what?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mushabi Jr. on your screen, bringing to you a program called Maisha Talk. This is where we build your capacity to achieve your dreams and visions. One thing I've learned in life is nobody can ever tell you that you can never be anything or achieve anything in this world. Shut them down. You can achieve anything in this world. And in this program, that is what we are talking about: principles, attitudes, belief systems, where you are going to gain a lot. You're better off than anybody who's not going to watch this program. This is going to change your life. It's big, it's fun, it's educating, it's entertaining. Right here on Maisha Television, where you choose it, you watch it, and you definitely love it.
This keeps me going on those days when I feel like giving up. Fire.
Do not want the money or properties achieved in a corrupt way.
Badala ya kusaidia watoto wadogo wadogo katika academies za sports, wewe kazi yako imekuwa kila weekend unakuja kwa matanga kutukana viongozi. Wewe ni waziri wa michezo ama waziri wa matanga na masuala za ndani.
Sasa wewe unatuambia nini?
This government is going to punish you more than they will punish me.
Tuko na mheshimiwa Eugene, tuko na mheshimiwa Lusaka na mheshimiwa Wetangula.
I have no problem. I have full confidence in the agencies that we have to do their job. People out there bandying my brother yesterday. Me, I've said, if he's guilty, aendelee.
Lakini hata nyinyi mkuwe na mshike rada. Sasa nyinyi wakati ya kufanya kazi mnasema tafuta Ruto, lakini siku ya kupiga kura mnaniambia tipping. Sasa nyinyi kweli mko na plani?
invite you to like Maisha TV Kenya on all our online media platforms. Facebook at Maisha TV Kenya, Twitter at Maisha TV Kenya, Instagram at Maisha TV Kenya. Maisha TV now invites you to send your feedback or complain because we listen to you. You can now reach us on all our media platforms on Maisha TV. Just send your messages to our social media platforms, call or text us on 0746 999 841 or send us an email to info@maishatv.co.ke. We care. We shall respond to your feedback or complaints within 14 days. Also, keep a copy of messages sent to us. We listen to you because you listen and you watch us. Maisha TV. Choose it, watch it, and love it.
I am PLO LUMUMBA here at the Maruba Dam in Machakos County in the Republic of Kenya in the continent of Africa, and we continue our discussion, and today we talk about African political thought. Some may argue African political philosophy, and some may even debate, is there such a thing as African political philosophy? And I think that is what makes the conversation interesting. Those who argue in that manner take the view that Africa is diverse and that therefore to talk about African political philosophy in such a broad brush manner is in itself losing sight of the realities of the continent of Africa. And I think that there may be merit in that, because if we look at pre-colonial Africa, there is a sense in which governance systems differed. And one can read writers such as Anta Chek Diop, who has written quite extensively about pre-colonial Africa and tells us that indeed African societies differed. The manner in which the Asante people governed their systems through kingship is different from the manner in which the Yoruba did. It is different from the feudalistic system that was controlled in the Buganda Empire or the Buganda Kingdom or the Bunyoro Kitara Empire. It was also very different from the militaristic, feudalistic systems and kingship systems that were to be found in countries such or in places such as the Zulu of South Africa. Very different from the Monomotapa Empire. And all these political systems were decimated when the colonizers came into the continent of Africa and dismembered the continent of Africa. And that is why, therefore, when John Henry Clark, that African-American writes, he says that when African countries regained their political independence, all of them developed or started building their countries on the basis of inherited systems of governance from their former colonizers, and none of them will ever succeed. And one can see, therefore, that when the struggle for independence is won, there is an attempt by the more intellectual leaders who head political parties or head countries to try and have different political systems. And these systems can then be described as ideological orientation. Of course, many of these individuals have had the opportunity to study in Western Europe, particularly in the countries who are the colonizers, some, of course, in the United States. And one can argue that they are influenced by those thought processes. They have met the writings of John Stuart Mill. They have met the writings of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. They have met the writings of Chairman Mao Zedong of China. they have read all these writings, but they are saying, yes, we have interacted with this knowledge, but we hold the view that there must be a different way of governing ourselves. And the one who stands out, or one of those who stand out in this regard, is the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, when he comes up with a system of philosophy of government called conscientism. And conscientism is unique because he characterizes it as a decolonizing political ideology. And understood in that sense what Nkrumah is saying, and I can still hear him saying, seek ye first the political kingdom, the rest will come later. He says that the process of decolonization must start with political decolonization. Once you've decolonized politically, then you can begin to talk about economic decolonization. And conscientism is a philosophy that undergirds this. And one begins to see the glimmers of Nkrumah's conscientism on the day of independence, on the 6th day of March 1957, when he says the independence of Ghana means nothing if the rest of Africa is not free. And he begins to argue that if we are going to build a new Africa, and Ghana is going to be the model, we must begin to have a model in which we de-emphasize feudal modes of government, in which we de-emphasize the political party as a vehicle of governance, because the political party itself is something that we have inherited from the colonizers, and for that reason we need a totally different method of looking at our affairs. And there are different ways in which his philosophy can be understood. But he's saying, in order to decolonize, we must take charge of our affairs. And I can still hear his stinging voice in 1963 on the 24th day of May, when he's telling the people, remember that one of the ways in which we are going to immunize ourselves is to recognize the modus operandi of the colonizer. And he says that conscientism as a political philosophy has the ingredients to ensure that when colonialism undergoes metamorphosis and becomes neo-colonialism, then it will be met by a political philosophy which is anchored in ideology. And that ideology is in Africanness. Today, I hear the word being used to characterize this called Ubuntu. I am because you are. And that is what sometimes is equated with what people like Engels used to describe as scientific socialism. That in order to have a decolonizing philosophy, it must be that you require the citizen to organize and to conduct himself or herself in a unique way. And that is why Nkrumah, in anchoring his political philosophy of conscientism, he says of Ghana that Ghana needs a new man and a new woman. A woman who realizes that he or she has a duty to his or her country, a new person who realizes that he or she must be ethical in the manner in which he or she conducts himself or herself, a new person, a person who recognizes that there is need to do things that are in the best interest of his country according to his or his ability, and only to expect as much as he needs in order to be a good citizen. In this regard, therefore, you can see that the dominating factor in the Nkrumahist philosophy of political organization is informed by the realization that in order to fight colonialism in all its permutations, and even when it metamorphosizes, not only demands but requires that you have something that is anchored in tradition. And he is already afraid. He is afraid of the fact that if you use Western instruments and Western governance systems, then you are not going to survive. And that is why he, as a transition, argues that multi-party political politics is also inimical to that particular enterprise of trying to build a new African philosophy. And this is his argument. He's saying whichever African country you look at is an artificial country. It was carved out in Berlin so that you go to Ghana, you find that there are communities to be found in modern day Ghana. Go Ghana, you go to Togo, you find the Moba. You Ghana, you find the Moba. And the net effect is that peoples were split. How then do you create a society that recognizes these realities, but also is sensitive and therefore helps the people unite in their diversity? And in order to understand that philosophy, one must then appreciate when Nkrumah says Africa must unite. And he's saying Africa must unite because he is conscious of the fact that Africa is so diverse. That is why one of the reasons why in his political philosophy he does not agree that we need to redraw the boundaries. That is why in 1963 the debate on redrawing the boundaries is suspended or adjourned to be discussed in Cairo in 1964. And that is why the philosophy of inviolability of inherited boundaries is then informed by this political philosophy on the understanding that Africa is going to unite anyway. Africa is going to unite anyway, and her diversity is going to be one of the building blocks that is going to be used for purposes of ensuring that the African vitality, African diversity, and African resources are used to build this unique Africa. And one can hear him say, once again in 1963, when his political philosophy is still developing, that we must come out of here united. We must have one army. We must have one foreign policy. We must have our resources and use it for the benefit of the people. We must not allow the political formations of Western Europe to inform what we are doing. We must ensure that the people's will, and this is something that is very prominent in the Nkrumahist philosophy. He's saying that whatever system that we have, the people must always have their will given its pride of place. And there is one instance, I think in the 1960s, when he's addressing the military, he tells the military, in this arrangement, the military have no role in the day-to-day governance of the people. They have a duty to defend the country. But if it should become necessary for them to interfere in the political arena, they must do so only for such period as is necessary. You can therefore see that in the conscientism philosophy of Kwame Nkrumah, the people are given their pride of place. People participation is at the center of this philosophy. The people's livelihood is at the center of this philosophy. The ability of the new nation to organize ourselves is at the center of this philosophy. It is a philosophy that is informed by the realization that those who dominated before will always try to dominate again. And you can see this sense of urgency when you read Nkrumah's conscientism, when you read Nkrumah's Africa Must Unite, and when you read some of his writings from when he's in exile in Guinea. It is something that reverberates with the whole idea of having a political system which is conscious of the realities of the continent of Africa, which is conscious of the realities and the needs of the people, which is conscious of the fact that we are not living in a world where everything is as good as we desire, which is conscious of what today may be called Ubuntu. In other words, it is a people-centered political philosophy, and it is a philosophy which then defines one of the more dominant political philosophies in the continent of Africa. Some even call it Nkrumahist philosophy. We will, of course, as we interrogate other philosophies, be able to see how there is an intersection amongst these philosophies and why they can be characterized as true African philosophies. Thank you very much. We continue with our discussion, and we have started a conversation about African philosophies. Today we have looked at what may be described as the Nkrumahist philosophy of politics. We shall continue again to interrogate other philosophies or other thoughts that qualify to be political philosophies. Thank you and see you again.